Oh, it's actually happening. Okay. All right. It's unbelievable how it's never easy. I log in half an hour before, but okay. All right. So the usual disclaimer is that I did my prayers before so that we can start. And my second disclaimer is that I haven't had a whole lot of time to prepare because of some incidents that kept my mind engaged and disturbed. But because I did all my prayers ahead of time, then it's all, safe. Whatever comes out, I know is what's supposed to come out. So the sound you're hearing, if you're hearing it, it's not Godzilla coming at me. It's just some teeny tiny monkeys that are they're howling monkeys in the forest, and we're gonna have to live with them. So I'll start with a little introduction because you just never know who's gonna run into these YouTube lectures, and they just may not know there's a whole series. But this is a series about the 24 gurus from the Bhagavatam, from the 11th canto on the Bhagavatam. And I'm gonna come closer to the microphone because that's pretty much how lively I feel today. Um, the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, where mm, Maharaj Yadu encounters an avadhuta, and he is so attracted by his demeanor that he asks him, why do you conduct yourself like that? What have you done to get to this level of spiritual realization? It seems like the world doesn't perturb you in any way. So he starts saying, I reached this level thanks to my 24 gurus. And then it turns out that the 24 gurus are the basic essential elements: water, fire, earth, air, ether, the sun, the moon, etc. So it kind of shows that, as I've been saying, that ultimately the guru is not the earth or this or that element in particular, but it's the principle of the guru that comes through us and teaches us, inasmuch as we are receptive to the knowledge, to the teaching, and inasmuch as we have the eyes and the ears to see the guru everywhere. So that's pretty much the overarching teaching. Whether I'll be talking about a pigeon or a moth or the fire or the earth. Last time we recapped on the earth and then we talked about the air, and today I'm going to do a little recap on the earth again and the air, and then I'm going to finish with a second point that I wanted to discuss when it comes to seeing the air as our guru. What I said last time is that the earth as an element stands for solidity and determination. So many qualities we analyzed, so many nouns that we could have taken as inspiration just from walking on the earth. So the point of these 24 gurus is that, okay, maybe you may not see a moth every day, but the sun, the moon, the earth, you walk on. As soon as you get up, remember I was telling you that in our deity worship book, there is a verse that we are supposed to recite in apology to the earth for stepping on her, and we say, I'm sorry, Mother Earth, but if I'm stepping on you, it's because I need to I need to serve Krishna. That's a pretty good attitude to have. So it's good to become conscious of the earth, of the fact that we're stepping on the earth, or that we're breathing air. We see the sun, we see the moon every day on a good day. But do we ever think in terms of spiritual thoughts? Do we ever even see them as our gurus? So it's a good exercise. Eventually, you will see that our gurus are not 24, but they're infinite. Every atom of what surrounds us is our guru, and that's our goal. As in as much as we imbibe this mentality and this outlook of the world, we will get closer and closer to the Vrindavan consciousness, where it's also said that every grain of sand is our guru, is as insignificant as a grain of sand may be here. A grain of sand in a realm made of Satchidananda and more is has more knowledge and more devotion and more anything to teach us than well, just has all the knowledge that we need and all the example that we need, because the focus of what's conscious or not conscious in Vrindavan is all surrounded, orbitating around service, and that is the main teaching, how to become a servant. Okay, so I was saying that in relation to the earth, it's really hard to concentrate with these monkeys and people coming in and going out. In relation to the earth, so I was saying that if we were to isolate a movement, a direction, we said last time that the earth goes towards the center. It's all about implosion and concentricness, to the point that, the atoms, the matter, is so converging to one point that it doesn't move. That's why we get the idea of solidity. If you stick your finger in the water, the atoms can move around a little bit, but if you cannot even stick your finger in a rock, that's how tight it is, how well solidified it is. And then we said, I won't get into all the considerations about the earth, but about the air, I said that the movement is quite the opposite. The earth is all about implosion, the air is all about expansion, or in other words, all directions, because you can see the nature of any gas. The moment you spray something, the moment you release some gas in the atmosphere that was previously compressed, it just goes to the first limit it finds. The implication being that if there are no limits, it will just keep expanding forever. Then, of course, keep in mind that any analogy only goes as far as it can, because, if you have a gas, say a can of, I don't know, something, some gas, Freon for your car, and you release it into the atmosphere, way before it reaches the limits of our atmosphere, it would become, it wouldn't even, it would cease to exist. You couldn't tell, oh, there is some Freon here. It was just, So, but let's just appreciate that the movement of any gas is expansion, so out and away. So I was saying that that's the teaching of air. It tells us to expand, but expand not in a physical way. I was saying that to expand our wealth, to expand our property, to expand the number of children that we have, to expand our knowledge, is getting more towards what I'm talking about. But these are earth centered ways of expanding. In other words, I get this land and I make him mine. I have this wealth and I make him mine. That knowledge, I make him mine. So it's all converging to the center, which in this case is me, all converging to a point. That's the earth. And by that time, the earth is not our guru anymore, if we if we reason in that way. The way the air is telling us to expand is in consciousness and awareness. If you are aware of the other, it could be at first your neighbor or your spouse or your country, fellow citizens or something. In as much as you're aware, I was making the example last time of the moment we become conscious of the plight of orangutans in Malaysia, our awareness, our consciousness, our choices will also change. We might not choose to buy Nutella in New York if that oil comes from Malaysia and it affects the orangutans that way. That was just an example, but the point is that we should expand in consciousness. So then I was saying that if we expand in consciousness, if You release a gas in a bigger environment, the gas will take the shape of the next environment. So, how far should we expand? Should we expand to the limits of the world? Should we expand our consciousness? And what does it mean? That we should be aware of every little planet and asteroid and black hole in the universe? No, it's not a physical thing. It's I was saying that if we were to imagine the universe as a sphere from the inside, like if we were inside of a Christmas ball, it would be like a mirror. And as we get close to the limits of the world, we would see that it's a big mirror and it's us. We look at the world and we look at us. We look at the world and we see us. Because ultimately, when they say that Mahavishnu emanates infinite universes, and in each universe there are infinite souls, or let's just say that infinite souls and infinite universes emanate from Mahavishnu, it could be seen or interpreted as for each universe there is one soul who thinks they're the center of the universe. And as a matter of fact, you do see that for each universal bubble, there's another expression of Mahavishnu. You can go into all the classifications, Karanodakashayi Vishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, what's the other one? Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. But ultimately, it would be a very good a very good exercise. Excuse me. Now, many of you will start thinking, "Oh my God, Syamasundara is becoming a Mayavadi." But it would be, if not a Mayavadi, an impersonalist, and still I'm not an impersonalist, I can guarantee you. But it would be a good exercise to, every time you hear about Mahavishnu, just take it as an example of what consciousness is and does, and as a reflection, what we do. Because it's all consciousness. In one sense, Mahavishnu represents the consciousness in relation to matter, just like we are atoms of consciousness, and we relate to matter in a certain way. So it's always good to see reality, look at reality in terms of macrocosm and microcosm. It's only recently that whatever the Vedas were saying for thousands of years ago, quantum physics have been able to explain by saying that I think there was at some point a controversy about the electron or any little particle of matter. Is it a wave or is it a particle? And then they realized, well, guess what? If you expect it to be a particle, it behaves like a particle. And if you look at it thinking it's a wave, it behaves like a wave. So all of a sudden you had science saying that consciousness determines matter. Consciousness determines reality. And that's pretty much what was said all along when the Vedas say that Mahavishnu glances at material nature. The moment he looks at it, matter starts to acquire meaning. Matter starts to mean something. In philosophy, they say if a tree were to fall in the middle of the forest and you don't hear it, would it even have happened? Like you cannot hear it, you cannot see, you cannot know. For all intents and purposes, like it didn't even happen. It doesn't affect your reality at all. And some people might say, yeah, but if you go there and you see the tree that's fallen, that reality did happen, whether you were there to see it or hear it or think about it. But, well, both things are true. I think I gave the example of the material world being a holographic projection, like the holodeck in Star Trek, where there are projectors that project a certain reality. And then if I'm here, actually the example I gave was that of a game, of a computer game. And I said that if I am playing at the computer from my house in Costa Rica, and I log into this game, luckily now virtual reality is coming to our help. And in the same game, another participant comes from Siberia and another participant logs in from Canada. We're part of the same game. They're typically war games, but I will only be seeing the game from my perspective. So if somebody gets killed, one of the soldiers gets killed, we're like, oh, so and so got killed. And I see it from this perspective. And the other person sees it from his perspective. And the other player says, oh, I got killed. So it's the same reality. But ultimately, subjectively, only I will perceive the world from this point of view, even if it's a common thing. Like, you can tune into a radio frequency, say, oh, I don't know, a famous radio. I guess every country has a different frequency. But say a national radio, you can tune in from your house, and somebody can tune in from the car, but it will always be a different experience, especially in this analogy. And forgive me if analogies, if I, well, no, don't forgive me, it's not my fault, but analogies only go as far as they can go. That's what they are. They're analogies. They try to see a similarity between a reality and another one, and they try to explain one reality by explaining another one, but ultimately it will fall short. So I don't know how far this analogy of the radio can go, but I think I said last time this story of the Krishna radio. When I was in Italy, there was a station called Radio Krishna Centrale, and they really tried to have it on 108 megahertz or something. The frequency, they wanted it to be on 108, but they couldn't get it because that was the frequency of Radio Maria, the Vatican, the Vatican radio. So 85 or something, and I had to like tune my radio just right, and then use the antenna and touch the radio while sitting on the washing machine or on the toilet in my bathroom to hear the kirtan. And if I would remove my hand or move the antenna a little bit, it will go from Hare Krishna to Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, etc. Um, so it's all about tuning in. Reality is all about and make my husband laugh. Reality is all about what and how consciousness tunes into matter. That's why they say Vrindavan is not a geographical place. It's a state of consciousness. So ultimately, we're called to look at reality through God's eyes. We're called to tune the radio of our consciousness on, radio, Paramatma radio, even better, Gokula radio, and vibrate at the frequency at which Krishna vibrates. Different frequencies would be different states of mind, different moods, and it could be the difference between Vrindavana, Mathura, Dwarka, Vaikuntha, Ayodhya, Brahman. It's all about frequency. We'll see when we talk about the ether how it's all about vibrating and all about frequency. So, if nothing else, you might want to learn this, that what we're called to do is look at reality, look at the world through Krishna's eyes, and it'll be as, he looks like a pretty happy fellow, so it should be a pretty joy. But what I was saying about the infinite universes and infinite souls was that, yes, the world is really, in a way you could say reality is what you make of it. So many examples are given of I think Srila Prabhupada was saying that this ant is sitting on the Vyasasana like I am, but her state of consciousness and mine are totally different. I am here lecturing on the Bhagavatam, and this ant is thinking, "Where's the food? Am I going to be squashed? Am I in danger?" Essentially, they think, "Where is food?" Because the state of consciousness of animals is annamaya. What they care about the most is how to get food, and yet they're in the same world. So you could have, if I were to explain it in esoteric or whatever terms, it's like these universes, the infinite universes that are said to emanate from Mahavishnu, all coincide, but we're all at the center of our universal bubble of conception, because that's what makes the world, our conception of it. Consciousness gives matter to gives meaning to matter. So, in yoga, I was saying last time that a yogi controls the world, controls matter, kind of like Neo in the Matrix, when he or she realizes what the ingredients of matter are and how they are an expansion of the yogi's senses. So remember the story of Dhruva Maharaj. He could master the air element by his breathing, and then at some point he held his breath, and the demigods were choking because they could not breathe if he wasn't breathing. And that's also a way to say how the world and one's body, and keep in mind that it's all aligned. Atma means consciousness, mind, intellect, and body. Because Atma means self, so whatever you identify yourself with is pretty much the platform you're functioning from. So you control your senses. A yogi controls his, what he looks at, what they smell, what they taste, their sleep. They control it all, and then they're in control of the whole situation, up, like extended to the whole world. That's what's called mystic powers. It seems hard to understand. How can I, control my, an aspect in my body and make it that I can control the same aspect in the world around, outside of me. Well, I gotta say that I had it clearer last time. Today, like I said, I'm very distracted. I can't remember how I went there, but it stands to reason that reality can be seen at a microcosmic level or at a macrocosmic level, and they all seem to interpenetrate like a fractal. I don't know if you know those fractal images where there is a spiral, like a fern leaf, and then if you look at a little element that composes the fern leaf, it looks like a fern leaf itself in miniature. And if you look to the little tiny element that makes one of those segments, it looks like a fern leaf, and it's like up to all the way into infinity or out into the infinite. The same over and over and over. You can see it in your body. The whole body can be found in your ear. The ear looks like an upside down fetus. This would be the head. That's why they say that if you put gold earrings here, stimulates your intelligence, and that's why during school age you got to put gold here, etc., etc. Your tongue has all your organs, your lips, your iris, your palm, your feet. Everything can be found inside of everything. My whole body can be found in one of my cells, just under the form of the genetic code. The DNA is found in every cell that constitutes the macrocosmic expression, which is the body you see. But somebody who has the right vision would take one cell from my body and say, okay, this is a man with green eyes and brown hair and medium stature, or whatever they can see. Okay, so I was saying that if we expand our consciousness like air is teaching us to do, we get to the limits of the world and we see that the world is us. And therefore, whatever we push out into the world will come back to us. We all know this. They call it the law of karma. Law of karma doesn't mean some kind of punishment that, oh, you will, it'll come back at you. It's really as simple as, oh, I don't know if I told you last time, I used to have a little carton here of pear juice. When I was a kid, I used to drink this like little juice with a little straw. And so I would put the straw inside, and then if I would suck, I would just suck the carton, and my cheeks would also suck in. And then, as a game, I would sometimes blow into the juice, and the juice would blow back into my mouth. So that's pretty much how the world behaves. Whatever you push into the world comes back at you. If you're generous, if you're loving, if you are understanding, if you are whatever. If you push out good things into the world, good things will come back at you. And if you take from the world will seem to take from you. You can, expand on this any which way, but that's pretty much it. So there's a direct correlation between you and the world. And so we've learned this much, but then I said, should we stop at the limit of the world? What if can we expand bigger than world? And how can you be bigger than the world? Because you are. We already were bigger than the world. Last time I made the example of a drop of blood. There's more blood in a drop of blood than in the whole Sahara Desert. And you'd be like, well, yeah, but we don't know that. We let the world be bigger than us. We let the external circumstances say, oh, this happened to me, therefore I have to behave like this. And Srila Maharaj says the environment is friendly, meaning that, well, first of all, it's not inimical, but well, let's stick with that. It's not inimical. It's just us putting out, you know, whatever vibration, whatever thought, whatever action into the environment, and it just naturally comes back at us because matter is all about static equilibrium. You push here, it comes out there. You must have seen those globes that they sell with snow, like, Paris, under Venice. You shake it, and then it snows, and then it just all subsides, and it's totally still. So that's what consciousness does to matter. It looks like in this world there are planets moving and galaxies and all this turbination of celestial bodies, and then on planets like ours you have winds and rivers and birds and fish and animals and people and all this stuff, but there's consciousness behind everything that is, well, animated. So if you remove consciousness from every aspect of the universe, it will just be, well, pradhana is the term. Just all the ingredients of matter will be in perfect equilibrium, because that's what matter wants. Just static equilibrium. All the fun, of course, consciousness is an irritant from the point of view of matter. Consciousness is like, what are you doing? Disturbing my balance. But, and that's why consciousness belongs in the world of consciousness with infinite potential. You could do it all. Everybody could do everything to an infinite degree because it's accommodating that way. And in matter, it just, you can see Mahaprabhu's body when the symptoms of ecstasy were blossoming on him. His material body could not contain it. So, what was I going to say? We are bigger than the whole world. One of us, one unit of consciousness, is way more important than the whole material universe. The whole, the whole of matter. So I gave the example of the video game. The moment the teenager turns on the computer, the game may go on, but he doesn't care anymore. Do the characters of the game die? Do they win? He's having dinner with his family. It's a totally different reality. And that what was the reality that he, as a conscious being, was absorbed into, and that he, as a gamer, was making relevant, becomes, for all intents and purposes, non-existent the moment consciousness gets focused on another object. Okay, so that's what I said last time. And then I said that air is telling us to expand, but it's also saying, how did I put it? Take advantage of me. Now, it just so happens that I'm reading a book called The Breathing Cure. And it's all about how the breath is affecting us, or how we are affecting our breath, so that the breath affects our not immune system, well, even the immune system, but I meant the nervous system. And by the way, just to show you a pattern, when the Bhagavatam was talking about the earth, it also expanded to talk about the tree, the mountain, and then the tree, same characteristics. So air can also be seen as wind or breath. So talking about breath, I was reading in this book that that at least my knowledge I had from school is that we take in air, which is mostly oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide and water vapor. We take advantage of the oxygen and then we release the rest, the carbon dioxide that was stored in our blood and it gets released that way. However, the findings, well, that's the thing. Findings of who, from where? Because the yoga, say, text were saying this all along. And it's really interesting to see how a sadhu thousands of years ago who would walk barefoot and just be in contact with nature and breathe good air and drink good water and be in contact with the sun and breathing correctly, etc., would be doing so many things for his spiritual advancement. Then, of course, all dependent on what the spiritual goal is. But say a spiritualist, and at some point the whole of society was called to be spiritualist, they would be doing what is so good for us psychologically and physically and spiritually that that only now science is coming to give support to. So, in yoga, and people don't may not know it because when yoga came to the West, leave it to the Americans to take something good and make it even better. They always have to enhance and just make it better. So I never had this sense that in yogic breathing, you need to breathe so lightly and so slowly that if you put a feather under your nose, you shouldn't see it move. You go to any of these places where they do yoga, it's all about and just big shows of breathe in and breathe out, and they do all kinds of panting and all kinds of breathing techniques. But it appears that breathing slowly, well, first of all, keep in mind that according to the Vedic worldview, we were all born with a certain number of breaths. So it's in your interest to breathe as slowly as you can and as lightly as you can. But no, in science they found out that something with the carbon dioxide that we think is a byproduct, and it turns out that carbon dioxide is what allows the next breath to take advantage of the oxygen from the next breath and do it in such a way that biochemically the oxygen become from the blood becomes available for each cell that the oxygen is supposed to nourish. And if we don't breathe properly, we can fill our lungs to the maximum, but that oxygen won't be bioavailable to the cells. So the teaching is that sometimes you need to focus on the negative space, on 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 silence and learning rather than on speaking all the time and speaking your mind. I remember that when I was going to driving school, I had this realization that, wait a second, they call it driving school, but here they're teaching me every instance in which I should control my driving. In other words, driving is easy. You push on the pedal and you go. But in driving school, they tell you slow down before a curve, slow down before a hill, slow down when you see a red light, slow down before, when somebody passes you, and slow, slow, slow. They're telling me what not to do. And that is a side note that came to my mind now. It's not what I was trying to say, but sometimes it's good to know. Well, you can see the value in learning what not to do before you learn what to do. In fact, when I watch tutorials on YouTube, and I watch a lot, I appreciate the ones that tell me, I don't know, say I'm learning how to do pastry dough. Not the ones that tell me, so you take the dough and then you put the butter and then you fold these many times. that I know, that's the theory. I appreciate when they tell me, if the butter is too warm, do this thing. If you screw up this way, you could do, you could brush some flour and make sure that, they tell me what to do when I do stuff wrong, or what not to do so that wrong stuff doesn't happen. But anyway, going back to the original teaching, focus on the carbon dioxide. So yeah, we're ready to like get rid of our breath out, but it turns out that as we hold our breath, we take more advantage of the air, even more so. They say they found out in the 90s that if you breathe really slowly, all this nitrogen that, according to science, up until the 90s was just inert. It had no value for the human body because we take our nitrogen through whatever, protein, through vegetables, and well, those who eat meat. Um, it seemed bizarre that 80%, because by the way, did I say air is like 80% nitrogen, 17, 18% oxygen, some 2% carbon dioxide, and then a little bit of water vapor. But that 2% is what does all the magic. And they also noticed that that nitrogen is not that useless. And if we breathe really, really slow in the air passage, the oxygen and the nitrogen get together and they become nitric oxide, which is antimicrobial. It stimulates the immune system. I think the vagus nerve too. And it's like the best thing you could possibly do. Just breathe slowly and lightly. So just like we should take advantage of air with our breathing, the metaphor is striking because everybody breathes. Everybody has to breathe. And yet nobody gives any attention to the way they breathe. In fact, this book is also adamant about breathing through your nose, because if you breathe through your mouth, you take a lot of air that only fills the top side of your lungs. And most blood vessels are at the bottom of your lungs. All the capillaries that can take really advantage of that oxygen are where your lungs are the biggest, at the bottom. So if you breathe through your mouth, you get a lot of air, but it stops here, and it doesn't give you as much, say, nourishment to your souls and to your brain as it would if you breathed correctly. And yet nobody pays attention to their breathing. Remember last time I said that air calls us to expand, to the point that just mentioning breathing makes you take a conscious breath, because you're like, oh yeah, breathing. So similarly, we're called to have a spiritual life. Why? Because we're spiritual beings. Spiritual life doesn't mean religious life. It doesn't mean moral life. It doesn't mean chant 16 rounds, do this, do that. It means realize that you're spirit. There's no life outside of spiritual life. Because if you live from the perspective of the body, you're just living for the body, for the advantages of the senses. And I mean, you think it's you, so you get some gratification, some fulfillment, but it's nothing like living, like I said, bringing your consciousness to the vibration of consciousness, of pure consciousness. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're something else. So, as much as we all breathe, just like we all breathe, and very few of us are conscious of how we breathe and how to breathe well, we're called to have a spiritual life, because it's the only life we can have, because we're spirit beings, and yet we don't. So that's one way in which air teaches us, take advantage of me, because there's so much that we could achieve if we lived at that level. I think I said last time that we were talking about Einstein, and now Einstein recognizing the importance of Vedic mathematics into, well, Western mathematics, because in in the Western worldview over the centuries, people were counting what can be counted: the sheep, the soldiers, the taxes. Nobody would think of counting what's not there, or counting the infinite. It's like, what? Infinite sheep? But the Vedic point of view starts from a totally different set of considerations. So they did have a word for the void, the zero, and the infinite. Because everything starts from the infinite. In the Vedic worldview, it's all about God, and then how our reality is all an expansion of an expansion and a byproduct. But they're very conscious of the divine dimension. Even in grammar, whenever all these verses talk about that, tat means that. It could be Brahman, it could be consciousness or God, but it always starts from he. Whereas, say, in Latin, in Indo-European languages that have a conjugation, it starts with I am, you are, he is, we are, you are, they are. Because all my students, I teach Italian, English, and Spanish online, all my students learn how to speak in the first person singular. They are concerned with I am American, I like pizza, whatever. And that's what they want to learn first. Whereas in Sanskrit grammar, the verbs are identified in the third person singular. Like you would say, how do you say to go in Sanskrit? Gachati. Gachati means he goes. Because the third person singular kind of tells you if the verb is irregular and how it gets conjugated. But it goes gachati, gachasi, gachami, I think. So he goes, you goes, and I go. You go and I go. It's totally reversed. And it influences your state of consciousness too, just to learn grammar, just to learn mathematics. So they have this concept of zero and infinite. And the potential of matter is zero. It's nothing will ever happen to matter as such, because it doesn't have a will, it doesn't have a consciousness. But the potential of consciousness, whether it's interacting with matter or not, is infinite. And so this infinite potential can only be expressed in the infinite, when consciousness vibrates and focuses on the infinite, not on this world. So, turns out I can barely make my second point, but I'll try. So take advantage of me. Spiritual life. What was I saying? Air is our guru and tells us, take advantage of me. So yeah, we should take advantage of our spiritual life, of the spiritual current, if and when it comes into our lives, and not be like all those people that breathe mindlessly, not knowing how well it would be, how good it would be for them to breathe consciously. Another teaching of life, of air, is, if not take advantage of me, don't get against me. You will never win. Because, like I said, it's your constitutional, it's your constitution. You can be deluded to think that you're made of matter, but once you start seeing things for what they are, it's only in our interest to submit to the spiritual current that comes to us in the shape of the instructions of the Guru, for example. I was just thinking yesterday of Christopher Columbus. They must have had such knowledge in the past of what winds go in what direction, what time of the year, to have the confidence to cross the Atlantic, not knowing what's on the other side, entirely based on the favorable winds that were blowing westward. It could have gone totally wrong. We could have never heard of Christopher Columbus and the Niña and the Pinta and the Santa Maria, because if the wind had changed, it's like unpredictable. But every sailor will know that you can only take advantage of the air, say the wind, at this point we're talking about the wind, to a certain point. So, going back to a spiritual metaphor, you should not take advantage. Well, there's this concept of Krishnanushilana, of taking advantage of what's favorable for bhakti, but make sure that take advantage doesn't mean exploit. So, in other words, Srila Maharaj says that Krishna will tell us, "Hey, I'm here, come play," and then we go there, and then he'll appear somewhere else and say, "Hey, now I'm here." And we should not say, "Hey, you said you were going to be here," and now what? Like, we should not fit Krishna's whimsical nature, because he's just a playful boy, and say, "No, you said you were going to be in this forest, and why aren't you in this forest?" Like, what are we discussing with a boy who is omnipotent and omniscient? And it'll just, I'm trying to make this point as simple as possible, but it's quite complex. The bottom line is that if we cannot take advantage of the wind, we will never, going back to the metaphor of the sailor, we will never be able to sail against the wind. Now, I don't know if they can do it, but let's assume that sailors cannot sail against the wind. You're going to have to row. You're going to have to get the oars and row. Um, Arjuna himself says controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. I remember hearing this and thinking, what's with this controlling the wind? Why? I couldn't quite understand just how do you control the wind? But why not control a river? Why is the wind taken as an example? Well, first of all, to control a river, you have to go into the river and then control it. How? With the dam? I don't know. But the wind, we all have experience of that. As a matter of fact, last month we had a Jamashtami retreat for the whole month, and there were a lot of guests. Excuse me. And as you know, some of you know, our prasadam room is kind of outdoor. It has screens. It has half walls with screens, but the wind, we're pretty much in the open. We're pretty much in the forest. So there's all kinds of dust and wind that can blow in. And I was sweeping, and there was another devotee there, and I said, "Man, I hate sweeping against the wind." Because you're sweeping and sweeping and sweeping, and the wind blows it all throughout the prasadam room again. And she simply said, "Well, just sweep with the wind." And I was like, huh. I mean, I knew it. It wasn't like a major realization, but it's as simple as that. It's just that in my little perception, in my sense of right and wrong, I start sweeping from the fridge and work my way to the door, and then I push it out the door. And it just took as little as changing my angle of vision, adapting to what was a problem 1 second ago, the same wind that was a problem, if I don't conform to it, became my friend, because now I was sweeping and I was lifting the dust, and the dust was being pushed in the direction I wanted all of a sudden. And then I just needed to collect it all where the wind was pushing it, put it into a dustpan, and then I went outside and threw it, and it blew right back into my face. No, I did, and I think I did it carefully. But anyway, the point is that you work with the wind, and it will always be in your interest because it's much bigger than you. And if we take the wind as the spiritual current, the absolute coming down to us to ultimately help us realize who we are, it doesn't help us to go against the wind. I got distracted because I was thinking of something else. Did you know that ancient Vedic cities, Ayodhya, or I don't know what I read years ago, but they said that ancient cities were built, which is kind of hard to think of cities being built, because in the Vedas it looks like everything always existed. There were always cities. But anyway, the cities, whenever they were built, they were built in consideration of the major winds, so that the wind itself would clean all the leaves and all the dust, go through the streets and push all the wind, all the dirt out of town naturally. Talk about smart design. So that's one way to do it. Another reference in the Gita is that Krishna says, "Of purifiers, I am the wind," which I also had a hard time understanding, because the wind ultimately just takes the dirt from one place to another. how does it purify really? Considering the fire is more of a purifier, but then it destroys everything. So if you want to purify, I don't know, something, if you torch it, then you're left with ash. But for example, the sun is a purifier. I guess the sun was already taken in another analogy. But anyway, Krishna does say, of purifiers I am the wind. And the whole point is how to take these elements, the wind, the sun, the whatever you see, and you're like, Krishna says, I am the taste of water. Every time you drink a glass of water, you're like, oh, this water is so good. If you come to Madhuvan, you'll taste that the water is not chlorinated and it's very nice. And you think, and water is so essential to us, to life. And you can become God conscious by just drinking water. So, the same with all these verbs from the Gita. Oh yeah, the wind. There's a lot of wind here. We have a windy season, we have a rainy season, a dry season. And in between, the temperature does it in such a way that the earth heats up and goes up. So the vacuum is filled by the air on the ocean, and there's like wind for 4 days. And why did I say this? um, why did I say that? Windy season. But yeah, just the when there is wind, when it's windy, you're reminded of Krishna. Oh yeah, Krishna is of purifiers. Um, Krishna, of purifiers, Krishna is the wind. Of all things that have a purifying power, the wind represents Krishna. And the same we can think of, everything that he compares himself to. Let's see, well, we only have 3 minutes left. Let me just, let me think if I have something else to say. Otherwise, I'll just read what the Bhagavatam has to say about the air as our guru, which I assume you all read because it's already there. It's in the Bhagavatam. Let me think. So yeah, just in general, it's a very powerful metaphor, the one of taking advantage of a favorable wind in our sails, which would be the instructions of our guru. And if you, that's also what's done by controlling the wind. You're harnessing the wind. Sometimes the way the sail of a ship, if the wind goes this way, you just have the sail parallel, but sometimes you can make it crooked, and I don't quite understand the dynamics, but I know that if you oh, okay, so if the wind goes straight ahead but I want to go there, I just need to turn the sail a little bit, and instead of going straight ahead I can go to the left by still taking advantage of the same wind that goes there. So it's a balance, like the favorable winds of spiritual life push us towards renunciation and being a paramahansa. But if we're not there yet, we can adjust the sail a little bit and say, well, I can probably do it as a grihasta for this lifetime or until later or something. But by all means, the most important thing is to not go against that wind, because it'll just, no matter how it doesn't make sense to us, it's not wise. That's the teaching, the main teaching, which kind of resonates with what's on my mind these days. The air is saying, take advantage of me, but in the very least, don't come against me. So, okay, there's only 1 minute left, so I'm going to read what the verse says. And next time we should be talking about the ether as our guru. Where's the Bhagavatam? Okay, so Canto 11, Chapter 7, verse 41 says, although a self-realized soul may live in various material bodies while in this world, experiencing their various qualities and functions is never entangled. Sorry, I read it. I misread it. Although a self-realized soul may live in various material bodies while in this world, experiencing their various qualities and functions, he is never entangled, just as the wind, which carries various aromas, does not actually mix with them. And there was another one. But you can see how these verses are very rigid, very dry. It's all about don't be attached, don't be involved, and be focused on the goal, which is fine. I mean, it's fine. But I hope you can appreciate that I'm talking about. I go all over the place with quantum physics and astrology and tarot and whatever anatomy and stuff, but I'm trying to talk about. I mean, I hope I've been making sense from the point of view of Vedic knowledge and our Siddhanta, but yeah, that is my hope, and in a way that is like closer to our immediate everyday reality. Let me just guess if by chance somebody's following the live on YouTube and maybe they have a question. No. Okay, so I will just stop here and I'll do a recap next time, but next time we should be talking about the ether. I don't know who's organizing these classes anymore and what day it is. Plus, I'll be on vacation between October and November, but whenever the chance arises, I'll be here, happy to share the few things I learned, and it'll be about the ether as our guru. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Sushi Guru Gauranga Ki Jai.